Hello, this is the second part of my video on the bylaws of the Constitution of the Universal House of Justice. It comes from an old manuscript of mine, the Universal House of Justice and the Baha'i World, 1963-1973. Obviously, the main source here is the Constitution of the Universal House of Justice, published in 1972. In addition, in terms of this general set of videos, I'd refer you to the published messages of the Universal House of Justice from 63 to 86. I'll give the details of all of these in the notes below the video. There's also an old article of mine which I co-wrote with Moojan Momen, tracing or giving a general summary of developments in the Baha'i faith from 1957 to 1988. Again, I'll put the details of that below. So I talked about the first four sections: community membership, local and national spiritual assemblies, the obligations of assembly members, in the first video, this two-part set. And now we'll move on to the other topics: the Universal House of Justice, Baha'i elections, the House's right of review of all Assembly decisions, the Baha'is' right to appeal against Assembly decisions, and very briefly just a comment on amendments to the Constitution. I'm going to leave out for the moment the sections on the Board of Councillors of the auxiliary boards. I'll deal with those elsewhere. So, first about the membership of the Universal House of Justice. According to the Constitution, the House must consist of 9 men who had been elected from the Baha'i community by secret ballot by the members of all national spiritual assemblies at an international Baha'i convention. Unless otherwise decided by the House, the election would be held every 5 years, and those elected would continue in office until their successors were elected and the first meeting of the successors was duly held. I should comment in passing, seeing it's a topic that is often discussed, that only 2 Baha'i institutions, the guardianship and the Universal House of Justice, are gender specific, being confined in both cases to men. All other Baha'i institutions, local and national spiritual assemblies, the International Teaching Centre, continental councillors, auxiliary board members, and so on, may include people of either sex. The principal business of the International Convention was to elect the members of the Universal House of Justice, to deliberate on the affairs of the Baha'i cause throughout the world, and to make recommendations and suggestions for the House of Justice's consideration. The sessions of the convention will be conducted in whatever manner the House decided. Regarding the election of the Universal House of Justice, upon receiving the House's call to the International Convention, each National Assembly would submit a list of its members as potential delegates. The recognition and seating of the delegates would be vested in the House of Justice, however. Arrangements would be made by the House for delegates who were not able to be present in person to cast their ballots for the election. If the House decided that conditions made it impractical or unwise to hold the convention in a particular year, it would determine some alternative means by which the election could be held. To date, I should say, that provision has only been employed once in the International Convention for 2003, when the House decided that the then unsettled conditions in the Middle East necessitated the convention's cancellation. The election was conducted by postal ballot instead. Anyway, that's that issue. On the day of the election, tellers appointed in accordance with the House's instruction would scrutinise and count all the ballots and then certify the result. If there was a tie vote or votes which prevented the full membership of the House being determined on the first ballot, one or more additional ballots would be held. This additional balloting would only be between those persons tied in the previous ballot and would continue until all 9 members of the House were elected. If a National Assembly member who had voted by mail then ceased to be a member of that Assembly before the counting of the ballots at the convention, his vote would remain valid unless a successor had already been elected onto the assembly, and the ballot of that successor had been received by the tellers. If additional voting had to be conducted, in the case of a tie vote, the electors would be the National Assembly members who were in office at the time the additional vote was taken. Vacancies in the membership of the House would occur under the following circumstances. 1. The death of the serving member of the House. 2. If a House member was dismissed from membership of the House on account of committing a sin injurious to the common weal. 3. If the House determined that the serving member was no longer able to fulfill the functions of membership. And 4. If the House accepted a resignation from a serving member. If a vacancy in membership of the House occurred, the House would call a by-election at the earliest possible date, unless it judged that the next regular election of the entire membership of the House was so close as to justify deferring the filling of the vacancy until then. The voters in a by-election would be the National Assembly members in office at the time of the by-election. As to meetings of the House, the Universal House of Justice would have no officers. It would conduct its meetings and organize its activities as it thought necessary. All its business would be conducted in consultation by the full membership, except where it made special provision for certain matters to be dealt with by a quorum of less than the full membership. The first meeting after the House's election would be called by the member who had received the highest number of votes, or, if he was absent or incapacitated, by the member who had received the next highest number of votes. If 2 or more members had received the same highest number of votes, the member calling the first meeting would be selected by lot from amongst these men. All subsequent meetings would be called in a manner decided upon by the House. In terms of signature, the House's signature would be the words, in English, Universal House of Justice, or in Persian, Bet Azam, written by the hand of one of its members upon its authority, and then sealed with the House's seal. The House would provide for the recording and verification of its decisions in the manner it thought necessary. The next topic in the bylaws is Baha'i elections. In order to preserve the spiritual character and purpose of Baha'i elections, practices that were detrimental to that character and purpose, such as the nomination of candidates and electioneering, would be eschewed. A silent and prayerful atmosphere should prevail during the election, so that each elector could vote only for those whom prayer and reflection inspired him or her to. All Baha'i elections would be by secret ballot. Elections for the officers of local or national spiritual assemblies and committees would be by majority vote. All the rest would be by plurality vote. Additional ballots would be held in the case of a tie vote or votes. Baha'i electors' duties and rights could neither be assigned to another or exercised by proxy. Just let me note, in case the terms were unclear, the elections for Baha'i Spiritual Assembly membership are by plurality voting. That means that those elected are those who receive the greatest number of votes. They don't have to obtain an absolute majority of the votes cast. By contrast, elections for the officers of a spiritual assembly, chairman, secretary, and so on, are by majority voting, and each office bearer must receive an absolute majority of the votes cast. The House's right of review. Universal House Justice has the right to review any decision or action by any national or local assembly in the world, and to approve, modify, or reverse that decision or action. The House also had the right to intervene in any matter in which a spiritual assembly was failing to take action or make a decision, either requiring the assembly to take action or itself taking action directly. Appeals against assembly actions. Baha'is had the following rights of appeal in administrative matters. First, An individual Baha'i could appeal against the decision of his or her local spiritual assembly to the responsible National Assembly. The Baha'i Assembly would then decide whether to take jurisdiction over the matter or refer it back to the local assembly for reconsideration. In matters relating to the membership of the Baha'i community, the National Assembly was obliged to take jurisdiction over the case and make a decision. 2. Any Baha'i had the right to appeal against the decision by his or her National Spiritual Assembly to the Universal House of Justice, which would then decide whether to take jurisdiction over the matter or to leave it within the final jurisdiction of the National Assembly. 3. In the case of unresolvable disagreements between local spiritual assemblies, any of the assemblies involved could bring the matter to the attention of the National Assembly, which would thereupon take jurisdiction of the case. And 4. A local assembly which was dissatisfied with the decision of its National Assembly, or which believed that the actions of the National Assembly were having an adverse effect on the welfare and unity of its own local community, had the right to appeal to the Universal House of Justice, which would then decide whether to take jurisdiction over the matter or leave it within the final jurisdiction of the National Assembly. In all of these cases, the appellant, whether an individual or an assembly, was to first appeal directly to the assembly whose decision was being questioned, either for reconsideration of the case by that assembly or for submission to a higher body. The assembly whose decision was being questioned was obliged to forward the appeal against its decision to the higher authority, along with all particulars of the matter. If the assembly refused to do this, or failed to do so within a reasonable period of time, the appellant could take the case directly to the higher authority. Local assemblies appealing against the decisions or actions of national assemblies should try to resolve their differences with the National Assembly before submitting the case to the Universal House of Justice. Then, not something I'm going to discuss here, but there's a section on the boards of councillors and auxiliary boards. I'll talk about that in future videos. And then finally, amendments to the Constitution. The House's Constitution could be amended by its own decision when its full membership was present. As always, many thanks for listening, and particular thanks to my patrons for their kind support and encouragement, which enables me to make these videos. You're very welcome to support my channel if you so wish. Do like, comment and share on the videos, it really does help. Subscribe if you want to be notified of future videos. I'll give a Patreon link below in case you want to provide practical support. Next week we'll talk about other developments regarding the Universal House of Justice. Have a good day.